That sound. Oh. Hi there. I'm Keith DeCandido, and I am here to talk about writing in other people's universes because I've done that, a lot. Over the course of my fiction writing career, which goes back almost 30 years now, I have written in over 30 different licensed universes, from Alien to Zorro. And in the middle there, I've also written a lot for Star Trek, as well as Supernatural, World of Warcraft, StarCraft, Dungeons and Dragons, Cars, Serenity, Resident Evil, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Farscape, Doctor Who, Andromeda, Alien, Marvel. I'm sure, and a bunch of others that I can't remember because it's been 30 years and I'm old and have a bad memory. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm probably just going to open it to questions pretty quickly, but just to give a sort of general overview, in particular to answer the question that I almost always ask about these things, which is how the process works. With almost any time you've got this type of fiction, what's referred to as media tie-in fiction, which apparently likes to fall down. It does not start with the writer. In original fiction, you write your book, you submit your book, and you see if a publisher will take your book, and you can send it to multiple publishers. That is not how this works with tie-in fiction at all. Tie-in fiction starts with the publisher. A publisher like Simon & Schuster, like HarperCollins, like Titan Books, will buy the rights from the production company, from Warner Brothers, from CBS Paramount, from 20th Century Fox, or from Marvel, almost all of which is now Disney, but that's a whole other problem. And then the publishing company will then turn around and hire somebody like me or my colleagues to write the book. At that point, we then write a plot outline, which we have to write, submit, and get approved long before we ever start writing a single word of the book. The plot has to be approved first by the editor at the publishing house. Then the editor sends it along to some representative of the person who owns the IP, or the company that owns the IP. Who that is varies wildly from project to project. Often it's some person in the licensing department at the company in question. Sometimes it's someone more directly involved in the creation of it. Rarely you will... There are times when somebody involved with for example, if you're doing a tie-in to a TV show, usually the people running the TV show are too busy running a TV show to actually approve this stuff. I have several friends who have worked in the writers' rooms of TV shows, and working on a weekly show is a 39-hour-a-day, 9-day-a-week job. And so these guys don't have time to read an entire novel and approve it. Which is why it's often somebody in the licensing department. This is not always the case, however, especially with shows, like a lot of current shows only run 10 or 12 episode seasons, so the schedule's a little looser. To give one current example, the tie-ins to the current Star Trek series, Discovery, Picard, etc., Stranger Worlds, are, at least some of the approvals are being handled by Kirsten Beyer, who is one of the co-executive producers on the current shows, and is also a Star Trek novelist of long standing. So at least somebody from there is getting involved. My favorite story, actually, my second Supernatural book, not this one, but the one I wrote after Bone Keep, I turned the Nevermore and the second book, which was written by Jeff Marriott, were both approved by somebody in Warner Brothers licensing. The third book, which was my second one, Bone Keep, I turned that in 2007. And some of you might recall that in 2007 there was a writer's strike. So when I turned the book in, Eric Kripke, the creator and showrunner of Supernatural, literally had nothing better to do. He was on strike. So he actually read Bone Key, and he was the one who did the approvals. And then, for at least as long as he was showrunner, it was his office that approved it rather than licensing. It was his assistant who would do the reading because he himself didn't have time. But and I have done some other projects where the people involved in the show have been directly involved in the tie-in fiction because they want to be. Others where they could give a crap and it just gets a rubber stamp from somebody licensing, and anywhere in the middle of that as well. Certain licenses are very heavily directed. The Star Wars novels, for example, are very, very, very heavily guided by the folks at Lucasfilm, which is now, of course, a subsidiary of Disney, like everything else. Someday we will all be owned by the Walt Disney Corporation after I say that. I did a novella. Everybody remember the show Heroes? And they did a miniseries back in 2015, I want to say, that followed up called Heroes Reborn. We did a bunch of novellas that tied into that new series. There were 6 of them. And we worked very closely with the showrunner on that. And I didn't realize he was the showrunner, because we were getting the scripts ahead of time and we were doing our stories and whatnot. And I was getting notes from this one guy, and it's like, great. And then I started watching the show, because our novellas were coming out as the show was being released, so we had to write them ahead of time. I'm watching the show as it comes out, and I realized the person who's been doing the approving is like the last guy listed in the executive producer credits before Tim Crane. This is the showrunner who was approving everything, which I didn't realize. So that was great. The novella I did for that was called "Save the Cheerleader, Destroy the World," which was because Hayden Panettiere, got too famous to play that role anymore, so they wrote her out of the miniseries. I did the bridging story that told what happened in the time between the last episode of Heroes and the start of Heroes Reborn, from Claire's point of view, primarily. And that was one of the best tie-in writing experiences I had, because the people were directly involved with it to that extent. Again, not always the case, but it's a lot of fun. I mean, the reason why I do this is because I'm a fan of pretty much all of these things. And some of them I wasn't a fan of, but became one when I started doing my research. For example, I knew nothing about World of Warcraft, except that far too many of my friends were losing their life to playing it when I was hired in 2005 to write a World of Warcraft novel. And then Blizzard Games basically buried me in lore. I got a crap ton of PDFs of various gaming materials and JPEGs and AVIs of the visuals, and I worked really, and that was another case where at the time it was a guy named Chris Metzen was in charge of the game story for World of Warcraft and also for StarCraft and Diablo, and for both the WoW book I wrote and for the StarCraft book I wrote, I worked very closely with Chris. Both those books were plotted during very lengthy phone conversations with Chris. The World of Warcraft one, I think that was about 4 hours on the phone, of which 3 hours was substantial conversation, and the other hour was Chris saying, "Dude, it's all good." That was his favorite phrase. He loves it. Probably the best experience I had. How many of you guys remember the TV show Farscape? Wow, lots of old people. Okay. For those of you who didn't raise your hand, Farscape was a science fiction show that ran from 1999 to 2004-ish. It was produced by the Jim Henson Company and made copious use of the Jim Henson Creature Shop to create both its aliens and its alien landscapes. It is still probably one of the best, most visually interesting and exciting science fiction shows ever done. I was given the unique opportunity to continue that story. The show was canceled after 4 seasons. They did a miniseries called The Peacekeeper Wars, and then I got to work with Rockne O'Bannon, who created the show, to basically do season 5 in comic book form with Moon Studios. So he plotted them and I scripted them, and that was another great experience. We had a wonderful time. That actually gave me the best note I ever got. Our second, we started out doing a 4-issue miniseries, and then we did an ongoing series that lasted 24 issues. And for the second miniseries we did, it was called Strange Attractors. There was a disease that was making everybody crazy. And Rockne gave me the plot for that. And I did a more detailed breakdown of each issue of how it would go. And one of the things I put in was, okay, not only there has to be a side, I wanted there to be a side effect from the cure. I didn't want them to just find the cure and then they're better. I needed there to be some sort of side effect. I decided that one of the side effects was that whoever gets the cure throws up. To which my note from Rockney was, love the puke! Who doesn't love puke? For those of you who watch Farscape, you will understand this, because Farscape loved dealing with bodily fluids all the time. It was one of the Farscape is the only show in television history where the problem of the week is solved with one character's flaming pee. And no, I didn't make that up. Rockney O'Bannon made that up. So yeah, Rockney liked the puke. And that was his idea for Moya to puke rainbows, so that was cool. Anyway, you're all in here, obviously, because you're interested in this subject, so for that reason, I figure I should just throw it open to questions to see what you guys want to know about this ridiculous process that I'm involved with. So are there any questions? Yes?
So you talked about how Blizzard Entertainment gave you almost too much information, would you say?
Almost, yeah. There's a lot of lore in World of Warcraft.
Right. So I'm curious in writing a story for my campaign based around the Dark Souls series. And with those kind of stories, the information is a lot more scattered and it's harder to find. How would you go about writing for something that isn't so information intensive?
Well, to give another Blizzard example, I also did a StarCraft novel where I had a lot more freedom. Because StarCraft is not as aggressively plotted as World of Warcraft, because, bluntly, StarCraft isn't as popular. When I was doing the World of Warcraft book, my approvals process was delayed by a week because they were too busy buying 6 new servers to handle the load of all the people playing the damn game. If it isn't spelled out, then you get to make it up, and then you get to run it by them and see if there are people who own it or okay with it. Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say, "Ooh, that's awesome, we should do that." And sometimes they say, "No, that's insane, you can't do it." That's one of the questions I'm often asked is, do they give you a Bible or a guide as to what to do? No, they never do that. What you do is you write the story, and if you do something that they don't like, they tell you. But you don't find out what you are and aren't allowed to do until you do it and they say no. Sometimes you do something that makes perfect sense when you write it, but by the time it comes out, something has changed. A friend of mine who used to edit the Star Trek fiction referred to it as the pizza problem, which was you could write a Star Trek Voyager novel. Well, this is while Voyager was still on the air that we said this, where Janeway is trying to find a pizza somewhere in the Delta Quadrant, and you spend the entire novel with her trying to find this pizza because she loves pizza and she misses pizza. And then you turn the book in, the book goes off to press, and then in the couple of months between when the book goes off to press when it comes out, an episode of Voyager airs in which Janeway has a throwaway line where she mentions how much she hates pizza. And you're screwed. This is the problem with doing tie-ins to an ongoing thing, is that sometimes you get it. But I mean, if there's something, part of the fun of doing tie-in fiction is being able to fill in gaps. So if you're coming up with a story that deals with something that isn't dealt with directly in the main game story, that's great, that's something valuable. One of my favorite novel series we did for Star Trek was a series called The Lost Era, which came out in 2003, with a couple of other novels that came out under the same general title a few years after that. But they were all stories that took place in the 70 or so years between the loss of the Enterprise B and Star Trek Generations in the beginning. And then the launch of the Enterprise D in Encounter at Farpoint. It was about 70 years of story time between those two events. And lots of stuff happened there, and we had a great time filling in those gaps. I just recently pitched a short story to Star Trek Explorer, which has not been approved yet, so I don't know if this is actually going to happen. But there was a throwaway mention of, in the last Star Trek Voyager episode, there was a reference to Janeway being kidnapped by the Kalidians, whoever the hell they are, and that Tuvok rescued her. This is all we know about this. That story has never been told, so I pitched it as a story to Star Trek Explorer. We'll see if they take it. So yeah, that's, you know, exploring those little, you know, side roads and back alleys and stuff is part of the fun of doing this. Any other questions? Yes?
Have you ever had like a major plot point in one of your stories that the writers were just like, oh no, you can't do that, and like, how do you work around that?
Oh, lots of times. There were two good examples of that. One which was easy to work around, one not so much. Everybody remember the show Sleepy Hollow from around 2013, 2014? Yeah. I did the one and only tie-in novel that Sleepy Hollow had. It took place at the end of the first season of that show, and the book came out when the second season was debuting. It was all, you know, part of the big push for the new season. And I pitched an idea to them. I pitched a story to them about, the idea was, and I took this from actual Revolutionary War history. For those of you who didn't see the show, Sleepy Hollow was about a guy named Ichabod Crane who fought in the Revolutionary War, died, and then is resurrected in the 21st century where he has to deal with stuff. And there's lots of flashbacks to his time in the Revolutionary War, including you know, demons who were helping the British fight the colonists. During the actual Revolutionary War, there were elegant swords that were given to about 10 different heroes of the Revolution. They were awarded in 1775. A French silversmith made them, and they were distributed to those people in 1785. And I thought, oh, this is cool. One of those swords is on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. That's where I saw it. And the swords themselves have these beautiful etchings on them. And I thought, okay, what if those are runes and they actually cast a spell? Because that would be in keeping with what Sleepy Hollow does. So I pitched that. And they say, great, we love the idea. It can't be a sword. Turns out they were doing a magic sword story in season 2, which of course I didn't know. So I changed it to something else. I made it a cross. You know, they did that. The worst. In 2007, I wrote a novel, a Command and Conquer novel called Tiberian Wars, which was done to tie into the game of the same name that was released by EA in the spring of 2007. In the fall of 2006, I spent a day at EA out in Los Angeles, touring their offices, getting all sorts of looks at what they were going to do and all the plans they had for Command and Conquer. It was going to be great. And they gave me the game script. There was a line in the game script where they mentioned about how a news report has to go through the government to be approved. Because the U.S. in the setting of the near future setting of Command and Conquer, the U.S. is under martial law because of this stuff called Tiberium that is infected around. And I thought, ooh, that's interesting. So I built an entire subplot around a reporter. And one of the things she has to deal with is the fact that the press is censored and that you know, everything has to be approved and whatnot. I turn in the manuscript. I get notes back, and one of the notes is, oh, no, we still have freedom of the press. Turns out they deleted that line from the game script after I visited, and I had to completely rewrite that subplot in about 2 weeks. Yeah. So that was fun. So yeah, it happens a lot. My favorite, though, are movie novelizations where, and this has not happened to me, thank goodness, but I know of several of my colleagues who have written movie novelizations where the studio has changed the ending. They want the novelization to reflect this changed ending, but they won't tell them what the ending is because it's a secret. Actually, that has happened to me in reverse, in that they made the change but didn't bother to tell me, so the ending of my novelization of Resident Evil Apocalypse is completely different from what's in the theater. I found that out when I saw the movie in the theater. Yeah. And there was another instance, another novelization I did where they did change the ending, but they actually brought me and my editor into their New York office and said, hey, look, here's the new ending. Please put it in the book. That was nice. It's always better when they're cooperative. Any other questions? You?
So I guess, can you understand me?
So far.
Okay. So this is, I guess, sort of like 2 questions and 1 question. So how did you get a start in something like this? And I guess by proxy, how would others? Because I'm putting it in my head and I'm wondering, so did you publish something original and then people in publishing companies thought that your style was good and then asked you to write for these other things, or did you like write fan fiction things, or?
So the first thing you described is the best way to do it. Is to establish yourself as a published author, and then you're in a better position to pitch yourself to tie-in editors and to be noticed by tie-in editors who might then approach you. Networking helps too in that regard. The way I did it is not really replicable. I broke in doing tie-in fiction, but also part of it was because I was editing tie-in fiction at the time. From 1993 until 2000, I was editing a line of novels and short story anthologies based on Marvel superheroes. The first two books we did were a Spider-Man novel by Diane Duane called Venom Factor, and a short story anthology called The Ultimate Spider-Man, which was 6 years before the Ultimate Universe, so we got there first. The cover to The Ultimate Spider-Man was done long before we had any stories in, because this is a crash rush project. It was a framed illustration with Spider-Man in the middle and 4 of his villains in the 4 corners. We had stories with 3 of those 4 villains. We did not have a Venom story. This was in 1994. Venom was absolutely Spider-Man's most popular villain. We had sent, remember what I mentioned about how you have to come up with a plot, send it in for approval? We had sent 6 different Venom stories to Marvel for approval. They rejected all 6 of them. We are past the 11th hour. My co-editor and I basically said, "What do you want in a Venom story?" They sent us a sentence. Based on this sentence, I went home, I wrote a draft of a short story, gave it to my co-editor. He ripped it apart, rewrote it from the ground up, gave it back to me. I ripped it apart, rewrote it from the ground up, gave it back to him, just like 3 days. And that was my first short story sale. That's how I broke into the business. A deadline crunch because Marvel was intractable with regards to a Venom story. And then I got, that gave me because I was an editor, I was in touch with other editors who were doing stuff. I wrote a Doctor Who short story in 1996 because the co-editor of that anthology was somebody who had written stories for me for one of my X-Men anthologies that we did. So that helped. But if you're not lucky enough to work for a publishing company that does lots of tie-ins, then the best bet is yes, to do that. Writing fanfic, I did actually write some fanfic before my professional career took off. There's nothing wrong with it, as long as you're not making any money off it. I mean, letter of the law, yes, fanfic is illegal. In reality, as long as you're not making a profit off it, no one's going to give a crap. And there are some licenses that have trolled the fanfic minds for writers. A lot of people who wrote for Bantam's early Star Trek line were people who were writing fan, particularly the anthology, the New Voyagers anthologies. They wrote Trek fanfic. And I know there were some fanfic writers for Xena back in around the turn of the millennium who wrote official Xena fiction later on. So and it's certainly a good way to work with the character voices and stuff, just for your own edification. But the reason why it's best to establish yourself as a writer of your own stuff first is when you are editing tie-in fiction, and I say this as somebody who has done it a lot, you have to deal with a considerably larger amount of bullshit than you do if you're doing original fiction, because everything has to be approved. The plot has to be approved, the manuscript has to be approved, the cover art has to be approved. Sometimes the cover design and the interior design have to be approved by the people who own the property. So you have to run everything by somebody in Hollywood or somebody in comic book office or someone at a gaming company or whatever. All that has to be, so that metastasizes the amount of work you have to do. An editor, therefore, isn't going to want to work with somebody who hasn't established themselves as a professional yet. There have been exceptions to that. For example, for a long period in the late 90s, early 2000s, Simon & Schuster did the Strange New Worlds contest, which was a short story contest for Star Trek stories that was only open to non-professional writers. That was I was not allowed to submit to Strange New Worlds. And several people who have gone on to very good, long professional careers are people who started out selling stuff to Strange New Worlds, including Dave Ward, who is now a New York Times bestselling author, Phaedra Weldon, Jeffrey Thorne, Ilsa Bick. William Eisner. These are all people whose first professional sales were to Strange New Worlds, and they've gone on to very successful careers. So, I mean, you ask any 10 writers how to break into the business, you will get 12 different answers. There's no one way to do this. There's plenty of wrong ways to do it, but there's no one right way to do it. Yes?
Is there any way to protect your before it goes to, like, say, you were saying Marvel or any other company? Say you don't take your work.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Your work, like, any way to protect it before it goes to, let's say, Marvel or any other company?
I'm not sure what you mean by protect.
Protect them by, so they don't take your idea.
So they don't.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Okay, I have often been told I'm worried about them stealing my ideas. They're not going to steal your ideas because the idea is not a commodity worth stealing. What matters is the execution of the story. There is a reason why everybody knows Shakespeare's Macbeth and only a few academics know Holinshed's Macbeth, because even though they're both the same story. Here's an idea. A ragtag group of people flying on a unique ship, including a charismatic lead, a cranky female second lead, a guy who's obnoxious and wants the captain's position, flying through space having adventures. I have just described Guardians of the Galaxy, Farscape, Lake 7, Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda, Cowboy Bebop, and Lost in Space. These are all the same idea. It's the stealing an entire story is a different thing. Having said that, if you are writing a story, with Spider-Man in it, you don't have any protection because you don't own Spider-Man. The Walt Disney Company owns Spider-Man, including the Walt Disney Company and all of their lawyers. So if you're writing a story using their characters, there's nothing to protect. And when you sign a contract to do a book, like Marvel book or any of these, what you are signing is called work for hire, which means you don't own any rights to it or control over it. Now it is possible to, some stories at least, and I did this with one project, and I'd rather not say which one it is, where I wrote a manuscript. The manuscript was rejected. They wound up going with a different way with the property in question. I was able to coin a phrase, file the serial numbers off, remove all the elements that belonged to that company, and redo the story as an original work of fiction, which you can do as long as you remove anything that is trademarked or copyrighted, which is easier for some stories than others. I submitted a proposal for a Highlander novel, way back when they were still doing Highlander novels back in the late 90s. And that story was focused actually on the character of Richie Ryan, and was his sidekick for most of the show. I couldn't do anything with that. That story I wrote was very specific to that character, and filing serial numbers off would not have worked. There was like nothing I could do with it, which is frustrating. But in terms of not, like I said, no one's going to steal your idea. They've got plenty of ideas already. They don't need yours. What they need is your execution of an idea. But by the time you get that far, you should have a contract in place. So, which is another reason why you write a plot outline first. You want to get that out of the way, make sure they approve it, make sure it doesn't step on anything else that's going on, make sure they're okay with it, make sure you're okay with it, so that everybody knows what to expect going into it when you actually sit down and write the thing. So yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned the monumental amount of bullshit that you have to go through, more so writing in someone else's world, with a lot of someone else's interested in it. How do you get a thicker skin? Just be like, they can do that.
I mean, you have to have a thicker skin if you want to be a writer for a living anyway, so this is just general advice for if you want to write professionally, regardless of whether it's your own stuff or tie-in fiction. You have to have a thick skin. You have to view the submission process as a job interview, because it is. And you can't take it personally. It's not you who's being judged when you submit a work of fiction. It is your work of fiction that is being judged. And yes, it may get rejected. It's likely to get rejected. I've been doing this for 30 years. I have written 60 novels. I have written 100 short stories. I have written 50 or so comic books. I still get rejected all the frickin' time. That's part of it. That's part of this business. Things get rejected for all kinds of reasons, even when it's good. Sometimes they won't take your fantasy novel about unicorns because they already have 6 fantasy novels about unicorns on the list and they don't want anymore. Sometimes, you just caught the editor on a bad day. Every editor in publishing has the story of the multiple award-winning New York Times best-selling manuscript that they rejected and that somebody else picked up. But you don't go on a job interview and it doesn't destroy your life if you don't get that job, hopefully. By the same token, when you're submitting something, when you're trying to write something, you have to treat it like work. Yes, it's art. Yes, it came from your heart. But hopefully it's not the only thing you're doing. Anyway, there will be other stories. There will be other opportunities. This metastasizes when you're working in somebody else's universe because there's all sorts of reasons why. Like, they could be doing a magic sword story in season 2 that you didn't know about. That happens all the time, especially if you're writing something that ties into an ongoing thing. So you just have to. The only way to have a thick skin is to have a thick skin, which sounds facile, but it's true. You just have to treat it like a job. And yes, it's fun, and yes, you're coming up with something creative, which is a very personal experience. But it's also work. It's you're signing a contract, you're getting paid, and that means you have to behave in a professional manner. And you should still, if they reject something or if they change something that was really important to you, absolutely get pissed off. Just stay pissed off to yourself. Maybe to your editor, but you're better. Usually when something like that happens, when a plot point I was really happy with has to get removed for some stupid ass reason, I get angry. I have a drink. I snuggle my cat. I'm a martial artist, so I'll go to the dojo and just have a good workout, and then I move on to the next thing. It's the nature of the business, and that's true whether you're writing tie-in fiction or not. It's worse in tie-in fiction, and it's more arbitrary in tie-in fiction because sometimes it's just they want you to change. They want you to change the name of this character. Why? Because they want you to change the name of this character. We don't know why. Just do it. They own it. You don't, like I said, you don't control the copyright. You don't control what's done with it. You're just the farmhand, picking the crops. So, and you get. It's fun because I get to write John Wolfe Picard. I got to write the Farscape characters. I get to write Sam and Dean. I get to write Ripley. That's awesome. My first short story and my first novel were Spider-Man, who has been my favorite superhero since I was 4. So, that's cool, but there's all the other crap that goes with it. Yes?
Have you ever been, asked to write something in work that you're not familiar with, and did you just, end up, binging the show, or, all of
Several times. I mentioned World of Warcraft, that's what happened there. For that matter, I wrote an Andromeda novel. This was the Kevin Sorbo show from the turn of the millennium. Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda. I knew of the show, but I maybe caught one episode, so I didn't really know that much about it. But when an editor calls you up and says, "Hey Keith, would you like to write an Andromeda novel?" and I say, "Yes," and then I hang up the phone and I figure out how the hell I'm going to do that. Conveniently, this was in 2002. They sent me VHS videotapes, because that's what we had then, of all the episodes, and I like it so much better when you can watch it on a streaming service, because the VHS tapes are big and bulky, and you only get 2 episodes per tape. And so they sent me all the episodes, so I did exactly that. Even if it's something I'm familiar with, I'm still going to sit down and marathon it the same way. Because you're watching for different things when you're going to write for it than you do when you're just enjoying it. I wrote a novel based on the show Leverage. and I watched Leverage religiously. When Ace bought those novels, I knew the editor. I was like, please, I want to write this. And thankfully they took it. I wrote a book called The Zoo Job. But I sat down and I rewatched the whole thing, but there were all sorts of like little character bits that I'd never noticed before because I wasn't really looking for that, you know. When I got the gig to do the Farscape comic book, I sat down and I rewatched that whole damn series, partly because it's been a few years. If I'm writing a Star Trek novel, I'm going to sit down and watch any episode. I mean, obviously I'm not going to watch 56 years worth of TV shows and movies, it's crazy. But I will pick out episodes that will help me, that relate to my story. Like I'll pick up, if I'm writing a Klingon story, I'll grab a bunch of Klingon episodes just to get those. It helps also to get the character voices in your head, you know. When I was writing the Thor book, I got a subscription to Marvel.com, which is the best $10 a month I ever spent. Because you have access to everything Marvel has ever published. It's fabulous. And they don't take up room in long boxes. It's great. And I was sitting down, I was going through all sorts of different Thor comics from the 60s all the way to the present day, which was great. It gave me all sorts of ideas for how to... I mean, I already had the stuff plotted, but it just, in terms of little bits of business, of things that happen to the characters, the way they react to things, it was really helpful. So even whether it's something I'm familiar with or not, I'm still going to do that research. I'm still going to sit down and watch it all, or read it all, or not so much. I mean, with the gaming stuff, it's harder. That's usually the case where they give me game material. Like for Alien Isolation, they gave me the script for the game. And so somebody on YouTube, bless their pointy little heads, actually put together all the cutscenes from Alien Isolation together as one big movie, which was great. The licensing people pointed me to this fan's YouTube video and said, just use that. And that was helpful. So yeah, the research is a big part of it. Although my favorite research story, and this is completely digressing from what you were saying, but I love this story. I wrote a CSI New York book in 2008. And I decided I wanted to have one of I had two different murder cases going on. One was in an Italian bakery in the Bronx, which was based on the Italian bakery in the Bronx that I was going to all the time because I wanted to have a murder there because I thought it would be fun. And the other one was going to be in a medium security prison. Because nobody ever writes about medium security prisons. It's always maximum security prisons or minimum security prisons, even though most of the prisons in the country are medium security. And conveniently, I had a friend who was a corrections officer at the Arthur Kill Correctional Facility on Staten Island in New York. So he put me in touch with the right people, and I got a tour of the prison, which was awesome. It was so much fun. I mean, it was a prison, but it was great. It was so informative. And the best part of it actually came at the very beginning. Before you even walk in the door, they have a check-in bin where you have to check any weapons or electronic devices. So I'm putting my cell phone in. And I said, cops, if a cop comes here, they have to turn in their weapons also, right? And without even prompting, the guy giving me the tour said, yes, and they bitch about it every fucking time. It's like, no matter how many times they show up, they always, oh no, I don't have to check my weapon. Yes, you do. So I put that in the book. I had to. Other questions? Yeah, you in the hat.
So you do a lot of world building, and then these are ongoing properties that get contradicted from time to time. There was a detail that you came up with for world building that got contradicted that you really love.
I'm trying to think. I don't think there was anything that was actively contradicted. There were some little character bits that just there was a substance that could and this is not a Farscape novel I did. There was, in an early episode of Farscape, we established there was a substance called, I think, chlorium, that can neutralize a Leviathan, the type of ship it was. And so I used that in my story, which took place later on, and the story that introduced chlorium was before Chiana joined the cast of Farscape, Gigi Edge's character. My story was after that, so Chiana's in it, and they used chlorium there. And then in a fourth season episode, Chiana's like, chlorium? I've never heard of that. That was a pizza problem I mentioned before. Aside from that, I don't think so. I've been lucky. If there is anything, I can't think of it off the top of my head. I know there's a possibility exists. For example, I gave Worf's mom a name because nobody bothered to fucking do that in 35 years. In my novel, The Art of the Impossible, I gave her the name of Kassin. We'll see if that. There's still 4 episodes of Picard left this season, so they can still contradict that and give her an actual freaking name. But as of yet, they have not named Worf's mother, so my name still stands. I wrote a short story for an X-Men anthology back in 2000 that gave the background of the character, the Changeling. It was an obscure 60s character that nobody gives a crap about, which is why I felt comfortable writing about it. And I keep waiting for them to contradict it, and they haven't yet. Every once in a while, stuff from the tie-in fiction will work its way into the main thing. Star Wars has done a lot of that. Like the planet Coruscant, for example, comes from the tie-in fiction. Number 1 on Strange New Worlds, her first name of Una, that comes from the tie-in fiction. For that matter, Sulu's first name of Hikaru comes from the tie-in fiction. And other bits and pieces will occasionally get introduced. And more often than not, yes, stuff will get contradicted too. Nothing yet, though. I'm still waiting. There's a bunch of Klingon stuff I've done that may wind up getting contradicted at some point. Some Klingon history that I've done, either in role-playing, for the Modifius role-playing game, and in various Klingon novels I've written over the years, but nothing yet. So far so good. But it does happen all the time. But we don't sweat it. I don't sweat about what's real in a fictional construct. Which is why, when people ask me about what constitutes canon, I want to run screaming from the room. Because, none of it's real. I'm also, I've had to listen to people say, well, I don't read Star Trek novels because they're not canon. You know what else isn't canon? The entire Marvel Cinematic Universe is not canon. The canon of Marvel are the comic books that are published every month, or every week, really. The MCU is tie-in fiction that is not canonical, so bite me. Not that I'm bitter about that at all. What bothers me is not that the argument about canon. What bothers me is that it's people coming up with excuses not to read books. And it's like, if you don't want to read the books because you don't want to read books, just say that. Don't try to make it, well, they're not really canon, because I'm sorry, if you've gone to see Avengers Endgame, then your argument doesn't hold water at all. Yes.
When you have something that isn't like Star Wars Legends, which isn't classified as canon, say they decide to canonize certain parts of it, or the whole book that say you happen to write or whatever. If they do that, is it typical for them to say, okay, you wrote this, we like it enough, we're throwing it in canon, we want you to continue, or they just say, we're taking your stuff now?
Oh, they take it. It's theirs. That's part of the contract we signed, is that we don't have any control over it or anything to do with it. They're welcome to use it or not use it as they see fit. It's really a case of the economics of scale. One of the reasons why the what is now called Star Wars Legends was, wished to the side, as it were, or in the cornfield, however you want to describe it, is because they were paying J.J. Abrams large sums of money to do new Star Wars movies. And they were not going to have him making new Star Wars movies that billions of people were going to watch. And they were not going to ask him to be beholden to some 40-odd novels that less than 1% of the movie-going audience has read. And that's the reality of it. The tie-in fiction that we write reaches less than 10% and often less than 1% of whatever it's tying into. Even the people who are aware that Star Wars novels exist, a lot of them don't read Star Wars novels or don't care about them. And that's why I don't stress that. I mean, yes, if they take something from the novels and put it on screen, great, awesome. That happens actually in gaming fiction more often. Like, there was some stuff I put in my StarCraft novel that is now part of StarCraft lore, which makes me very happy, because I had fun writing that book. But it's not, it's all stuff owned by whoever. It's owned by Lucas / Disney. It's owned by CBS Paramount. It's owned by Blizzard Games. They can do whatever they want with it, and we know that going in. mean, it's right. If one of my, if for example, one of my most well-reviewed Star Trek books, and also one of my worst-selling Star Trek books, which is wonderful, was a 2005 novel called Articles of the Federation, which was basically a Star Trek version of The West Wing. It was a year in the life of the Federation president. So it's entirely about the Federation government. Which is why when in season 3 of Star Trek Discovery, when they introduced the President of the Federation as a supporting character, I was cheering. Because we find, this is like, because I literally wrote the book on the Federation presidency. But I would love it if, if Star Trek Picard introduced the president character I created, Nan Bako, if they introduced her as the President of the Federation. I wouldn't get anything for it, except for, happy fuzzy feelings. And it would especially make me happy because I named her after my great-grandmother. But I don't expect it to happen. And it won't get me anything aside from that if it does. And that's another thing. I established a lot of stuff about the Federation government that could very easily be shit-canned by something they do on one of the TV shows now. Yeah.
I know it's kind of looked down upon most of the time, but I feel like you're being really technical at like work. Have you ever tried to sneak yourself into work before?
I'm sorry?
Have you ever tried to sneak yourself into any of your works?
I would never do that. What are you talking about? No, never. Not at all. Next question. No, there's one character. There is one character in a Star Trek novel, a guy named Sonic Brand, who is a character a type of character I've always wanted to write, which is somebody whose superpower is talking to people. And it's a character I've sort of done before, patterned after myself. When I actually wrote him in the Star Trek book, I made him less like me, because I thought it would be a little obvious if I did that. But there's still, it's a character I think is a very Star Trek character. It's somebody who has absolutely no superpowers whatsoever except the ability to talk to people. And that's how he gets stuff done. And because that's what Star Trek is really about. Star Trek is about the compassionate response rather than the violent response. And I haven't gotten to do anything else with the character, unfortunately. Anyway, yes, the blue shirt.
So you mentioned before about how less than 1% read these novels.
Yes.
What's the I guess if I'm a company, why would I necessarily want to do that if it's reaching such a small audience? How is that financially beneficial to me then?
Well, it's still an audience. I mean, it's still people, and especially it's something for the hardcore fan base to get more stories from. There's no losing there. It doesn't reach everybody, but it does reach people who want it, and that makes it valuable. And there's stuff that we can do in tie-in fiction that the source material either can't or won't do. To give one example, Supernatural. This is a TV show about these two brothers who drive around in their really cool car, drive all over the country, shoot monsters in the head, and then drive off. For 15 years on television, they drove all over the country, and everywhere they went looked just like Vancouver. Crap. Okay. It's only 5:30.
Right.
I thought I had till 5:45.
5:30.
I'm sorry?
5:30.
Oh, they told me 5:45.
Yeah, sorry, but it's 5:30. I have the adjustment in here.
Okay, I will talk quickly. In the novels, this takes place in New York City. I've got one in Key West and one in San Francisco. Because you cannot make Vancouver look like Key West, I can tell you that. And that's part of. So in a novel, we can embrace the location in a way the show can't. The lost era thing I was talking about is good because in fiction we're not constricted by actor availability or actor age. I was able to write a story involving Picard and Sisko dealing with each other, which didn't mean we didn't have to find a way to hire both Patrick Stewart and Avery Brooks to work together. So there's benefits there. And like with the Farscape comic, where we're continuing the story after it's over, where there's not enough of an audience to support the TV show, but there is enough of an audience to support a comic book. So it gives them something. So there's still value in it. I am at table 14 in the dealer's room, which is way the hell on the far end of the dealer's room in the Artist Alley section. I have all of these books for sale. I am happy to continue answering your questions there until 7 o'clock when they're going to kick us out of the room, as they're doing here. So, thank you all so much for coming. I appreciate it.